IO. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. A stunning development deep inside occupied territory. That's what's demanding our attention today. The target, Russia's most sophisticated air defenses. And the result? Well, it's confirmed hits. This is the latest news. Russian S-300V and Buk-M3 air defense components hit in Crimea. Video. December 26, 2025. I'm Alex. Join me with Arya in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today, we're really going to break down what the systematic degradation of Russian air defense actually means for the course of the conflict.
Yeah, and our mission here is to analyze the sheer strategic significance of what Ukraine is doing with its long-range strike capabilities. This isn't just, about knocking out a few batteries here and there. We're looking at how Ukraine has shifted from a purely defensive, reactive posture to aggressively adopting an offensive strategy, one designed to deny Russia air superiority across the entire theater. When you look at these successes in late 2025, they just expose these critical structural weaknesses in the Russian defense apparatus that, frankly, nobody saw coming.
And we are going deep into those failure points today, and we've got some, I think, surprising facts that should really stick with you. First, we're going to reveal exactly how Ukraine's successful deep strikes are targeting the Achilles heel of systems like the S-400, specifically their reliance on these critical foreign microchips that Russia they can't make them at home.
And then we'll be detailing the astonishing tactical successes of Ukrainian counterattacks around Kupiansk. These are gains on the ground that have become impossible for the Kremlin to deny. It's actually forcing their own mill bloggers to openly criticize the military command for, and I'm quoting here, blatantly lying about the situation.
And finally, we're going to examine the Kremlin's immediate and total rejection of the latest 20-point peace plan. And that rejection really confirms President Putin's maximalist war aims are completely unwavering. It shows us that this strategic deadlock, it's probably here to stay.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it, starting with the operational significance of striking these high-value defense assets. So let's focus on that initial event, the December 26th strike. This was Ukraine's primary unit. They targeted and hit an S-300V launcher and some Buk-M3 vehicles in Crimea. For those listening who might not be experts, why is hitting that specific combination, the S-300V and the Buk-M3, so important?
Well, it really represents this continued focus on degrading Russia's integrated air and missile defense, or IAMD. Hitting a sophisticated, mobile, high-value asset like an S-300V is not easy. But the real message here, the underlying one, is this fundamental conceptual shift. For, the first year of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's air defense was all about survival.
Just intercepting incoming threats.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to stay alive. Now, the most significant change is this increased proactive effort to negate Russian threats before they even get a chance to launch a cruise missile or put a jet in the air.
And we know this aggressive, proactive strategy really kicked into high gear after the U.S. gave the authorization for Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons to strike targets inside Russia. That was back in November 2024.
That's right.
That authorization, even though it was geographically limited, it seems to have unlocked this whole offensive side of air defense.
That's a critical point. That was the political key. And we see this deep strike strategy just illustrated so clearly in the operations throughout December 2025. They're hitting the brains, the eyes, and the logistics of the Russian war machine all at the same time.
So give us some examples. What other parts of that IMD network have been degraded beyond just that one launcher?
We've seen repeated strikes against these crucial static components that high-end systems like the S-300 and S-400 need to function. For instance, Intel confirmed an attack on a 96L6E radar component on December 14th. This radar is the long-range engagement tool.
It's the eye of the system.
It is. Hitting it effectively blinds a full S-400 battery. It forces them to fall back on less capable, shorter-range radars, which limits their strategic coverage, their whole operational window.
And they aren't just hitting radar, they're going after the capacity to launch in the first place.
Exactly. We've seen successful attacks on Russian air bases, on the fuel distribution networks they need to keep combat planes flying. You have to consider the Yeysk Air Base strike. It reportedly hit an An-26 transport, a C-24 tactical bomber, and there are even intelligence reports of a successful strike on an Il-38N maritime patrol aircraft.
And that distinction hitting the aircraft and the fuel is so relevant for you listening because destroying these strategic bombers and strike aircraft, I mean, these are assets that are considered irreplaceable in the near term. You're essentially destroying Russia's ability to launch these very expensive long-range cruise missiles from way outside Ukraine's own air defense coverage.
And this proactive approach, it extends way beyond the front line. Ukraine is successfully targeting Russia's defense industrial base, the DIB, and its energy infrastructure hundreds of kilometers away. We've got reports of strikes on oil and gas infrastructure, including a first-ever strike on the Filanovsky oil field platform in the Caspian Sea. That halted production at over 20 wells. It shows incredible reach and precision.
And they're targeting the production of the weapons themselves, too, right?
Precisely. Vital DIB facilities were hit, like the Efremov synthetic rubber plant, which makes components for solid rocket fuel. And this really is the core of the new strategy. Destroying fuel, or an airbase, or a production plant, is so much more effective at reducing Russia's overall military threat than just waiting to shoot down the drones and missiles once they're already in the air, heading toward cities.
Offense has the best defense.
Offense complementing defense in the most efficient, strategic way possible. But this discussion about efficiency and attrition, it brings us to a bit of a paradox. Because while Ukraine's deep strikes are getting more effective, the Russian air defense network is still formidable. A recent report from USI still calls it the densest, most sophisticated, and most integrated in the world.
Right, and that report also had a pretty sobering finding, didn't it? It said fewer than 10% of Ukraine's deep strikes against these protected targets actually hit successfully. That even combined drone and missile attacks are rarely repeatable against the same place. So, given that level of sophistication, how is Ukraine pulling this off? Where's the weakness they're exploiting?
That's the million-dollar question, and the answer, it really lies in the supply chain. Russia's high-tech system is, ironically, fundamentally undermined by this shallow, sanctioned, vulnerable supply chain. The whole system is only as strong as its weakest imported link.
Let's break down that technical Achilles heel. We always hear about chips.
Right, so take the S-400's brain, the Ilbris 90 microcomputing system. This thing manages radar processing, tracking, fire control. It's what lets the S-400 see and shoot at multiple targets at once. And that system relies completely on Taiwanese chips that Russia simply cannot make itself.
So if those chips run out?
If they fail or they run out, the multi-target capability of the S-400 just degrades dramatically. The entire strategic system becomes a hostage to export controls and interdiction.
And that dependency goes beyond just the fancy computers, doesn't it? You mentioned raw materials earlier.
Oh, absolutely. The physics of these high-power electronics requires very specific materials. Russia has no operating domestic plants for things like beryllium oxide ceramics. Those are essential for heat sinks in the high-power electronics inside their radar systems.
So without them, the system just overheats.
It's like running a high-performance computer without a cooling fan. The system just burns itself out. Russia's forced to import these materials from places like Kazakhstan just to keep its long-range radar operational.
So if they can't import legally, they smuggle. How big is that shadow economy for military parts?
It's massive.
Yeah.
And it reveals this critical dependency that can be targeted and monitored. For example, Russian companies were documented importing $1.1 million worth of Rogers printed circuit boards in 2024 alone. They use these complex routes through China, Turkey, India, Lithuania, just to get those crucial parts directly to military plants.
Okay, so targeting the supply chain makes sense. But what about the assembly side? Like the Pantsir systems? Those are Russia's close-in goalkeepers, right? The last line of defense for high-value sites.
Right, and what's fascinating here is how the S-400, a system built for strategic depth, is undermined by a shallow supply chain, while the short-range Pantsir is vulnerable because of concentrated production. The two main production sites for the Pantsir S-1 are clustered together in Tula.
How far is that from Ukraine?
Only about 350 kilometers. They've effectively put all their eggs in one basket.
Which presents a very high-value kinetic target. If Ukraine can saturate the defenses there, even for a short time, they could cripple Russia's ability to replace these systems, especially since reports suggest they're burning through Pantsir interceptors faster than they can make them.
And we haven't even touched on the cyber risks. Russia's heavy reliance on foreign software components creates this huge attack surface for cyber attacks, potentially allowing actors to compromise the design, the modeling, even the operational data of their radar systems. It's really It's a house of cards built on imported parts and concentrated infrastructure.
So this successful deep strike campaign is clearly having a crippling effect on Russia's military. But how is that pressure showing up on the ground? Let's turn our attention to the ground war, specifically what we're seeing in the Kupiansk direction in December 2025.
The Ukrainian counterattack in Kupiansk is so important. It really shows the resilience of their forces and their ability to defend and counterattack, and it directly contradicts Moscow's whole narrative that the Ukrainian lines are collapsing. Since December 11th, Ukrainian forces have liberated or held positions covering over 182 square kilometers. That includes measurable advances in central Kupiansk.
And these tactical losses led to a pretty spectacular failure in Russia's cognitive warfare, their propaganda. We saw Kremlin-affiliated mill bloggers openly criticizing their own military command for blatantly lying about seizing Kupiansk. Why does that internal criticism matter so much?
It's more than just criticism. It exposes operational weakness. The false reporting was so bad that it apparently led to inappropriate orders from high command, like redeploying reserves prematurely based on these fake success stories.
Leaving the area vulnerable.
It's exactly vulnerable to Ukrainian counterattacks. That failure in Kupiansk really highlights Russia's inability to conduct these big, multi-pronged offensives. They just don't have the manpower or material. They're forced to fix huge numbers of troops in that one area, which stops them from launching bigger offensives toward key targets like Sloviansk.
So while Russia is constrained on the ground and getting hit deep behind the lines, they're doubling down on another front. Energy warfare. We saw those massive missile and drone strikes against Ukrainian energy infrastructure between December 22nd and 24th.
Yeah, that contrast is really instructive. You have Ukraine's targeted precision deep strikes on one hand, and Russia's continuous wide-area attacks on civilians on the other. Russia's goal is simple but catastrophic: split Ukraine's energy grid in half. This strategy forces Ukrainian air defense into making impossible choices.
Do you protect a command post or do you protect a power plant?
Exactly. Do you defend military assets or civilian infrastructure in multiple oblasts at once? This is the complex challenge of integrated air and missile defense that you, the listener, need to understand. Ukraine has to use these expensive interceptors against cheap, numerous drones, while simultaneously keeping up the pressure of the deep strike campaign. It's a resource game that Russia is trying to exploit. And this whole ongoing attrition battle, both in the air and on the ground, it brings us back to the diplomatic front, or the strategic deadlock. On December 23rd, the U.S., Ukraine, and European partners released the latest 20-point peace plan.
And the U.S. will reportedly present this to Russia. It summarizes agreed-upon proposals, but there are still huge sticking points, right? Like control over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
A huge one. And the Kremlin's response, as you mentioned, was immediate and completely uncompromising. They just rejected the plan outright, reiterating Putin's maximalist demands. These demands haven't changed since 2022, and they are total non-starters for Kyiv.
So what are they? A complete withdrawal from all of the 4 claimed oblasts: Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson, even though they don't fully occupy them.
Correct. And on top of that, Ukraine must abandon NATO membership, demilitarize, and denazify. And we have to be clear, those terms are Kremlin code for eliminating Ukraine's military and replacing its democratically elected government with a puppet regime. And of course, they demand the lifting of all Western sanctions.
This raises a really important question. Russia's position is completely uncompromising, and they're optimizing for a slow, grinding war. It really shows the Kremlin doesn't believe this is ending anytime soon. They want an agreement that gives them long-term control over Ukraine. So why repeat demands they know will be rejected?
It sends a clear message. It tells Europe and Washington that negotiations will only ever happen on Moscow's terms. And this just underscores the absolute need for robust, permanent security guarantees for Ukraine. Without strong, enforceable commitments from the West, any future agreement would just be a temporary pause. It would just give Russia time to rearm and try again to achieve those original war goals. The diplomatic door is still firmly shut by the Kremlin.
So to synthesize all this, we've tracked this whole strategic evolution today. We started with that tactical hit on the S-300 and Buk system in Crimea, and we followed that thread all the way to this larger strategic picture. Ukraine is successfully adapting its strategy to strike deep into Russia's military and economic infrastructure. It's exploiting systemic weaknesses that even the world's so-called densest air defense system can't cover.
Yeah.
And this proactive strategy is putting immense strain on Russia, both on the front lines in places like Kupiansk and deep inside their high-tech industrial base.
And, here's where it gets really interesting when you step back. Russia's military viability depends so heavily on sophisticated foreign parts and these few concentrated production sites. It's a massive vulnerability for a country facing sustained sanctions. The systematic targeting of these vulnerabilities demonstrates, I think, a crucial lesson from this war. The most effective air defense for a nation like Ukraine may not just be about interceptors anymore. It might be the capacity to destroy the enemy's industrial base, their launch platforms, and their command nodes hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Arya, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.